The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. Story 1. I found an old game console from my childhood in my garage, but no one else remembers its existence. When I was a small boy, I had very few friends. I occupied myself with reading, even as a child. By the time I was in first grade, I was reading Dante's Inferno and Stephen King's It, while many of my less mentally acute classmates were still reading picture books. Along with a lot of time spent reading, video games were growing rapidly in popularity when I was young. When I was barely in kindergarten, I remember seeing the pixelated, extremely low-resolution screen of a Warcraft 1 game, and I was amazed. It nearly hypnotized me as I watched the little blocks of men and orcs run around, chop down trees and murder each other. Classic consoles like Sega Genesis had only recently come out, along with the first primitive PC games like Doom and Diablo. I was the type of person to never throw away any books or games. About anything else, I didn't give a shit. But these things were different. Books in the Middle Ages were worth more than their weight in gold. And perhaps I still had some unconscious racial memory of that dark time. I was sifting through boxes of old childhood mementos in my garage when I found the console that would cause me such trouble. The boxes were all marked Andrew's Games in my mother's flowing cursive. When she had died a few months earlier, I had gone to clean out her house and found it in the basement along with other dusty boxes. I had taken them all home to look through them later. My brother Tristan was by my side, his shaved head gleaming with sweat in the hot, stuffy garage. Sweat glistened on his upper lip as he chugged a beer, his third in the past hour. He was always a heavy drinker. Like me, Tristan was in his mid-30s and had grown up in the early video game era, playing lots of classic Nintendo, Doom and Diablo. I figured he would be a good person to have around, as he was one of the few people I knew who would actually be able to appreciate the collection. His beer belly hung low over his too tight blue jeans, jiggling as he circled the table like a shark. "You've got a lot of Sonic crap in here," Tristan said, rifling through the box and pulling out boxes of Sega Genesis games. I always hated Sonic. Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat were way better games. "How can anyone hate Sonic? That's like hating Mario," I said as we organized and stacked games on a large wooden table. I figured it was time to sell some of this stuff, if anyone even wanted old games like these. My fingers closed around something round, about the size of a baseball. I looked down, seeing a strange console laying at the bottom corner of the box with a spherical plastic eye attached to the top. I pulled the console out, inspecting it closely. Tristan went quiet by my side. I gently laid it out on the table, recognition hitting me like a flash of lightning as I stared intently at the console. It was bright green, all fluorescent day-glow colors. At the top of it, it had a single staring eye, the dilated pupils staring out intently forwards. Thin, red vessels spider-webbed through the plastic sclera, making the eye seem even more bloodshot and insane. Around the circumference of the eye, I saw small, plastic tentacles waving out to the side. "Holy shit!" I said, excited. "It's my virtual god. I haven't thought about this thing in such a long time." Tristan looked at me oddly, staring between me and the console as if expecting a punchline. A long, low hum sound whispered from his open mouth. "What? That's not a real thing," he said, confused. He picked up the console, bringing it inches from his right eye and squinting down at it before flipping it over. "Is this some sort of art project or something? What the hell even is this? I never saw you have this when we were kids." "Are you kidding me?" I answered fervently, pulling out the small, green games from the box. "Look, There's games for it right here. You just slip this square cartridge into this hole. I showed him the black opening like a knife slice stretching out beneath the eye. And you hit the top of the eye to turn it on. It was so cool. I can't believe I forgot all about it. Show me, Tristan said, unconvinced. He picked up the games for the virtual god, looking through them slowly. Dead Man's Alley? Dark Presence? What the hell are those games? I've never heard of any of them. Are these all Chinese knockoffs or something? He laughed. That's probably why I've never heard of this thing. This is probably some piece of shit third world console. I gave him a half smile. Let's turn it on and see, I said, hurrying back towards the living room with the console in one hand and a couple random games in the other, the electrical cord dragging on the floor behind me like a dead snake. A pounding excitement rose in my chest. What game do you want to try first? I asked excitedly, looking at the fluorescent green cartridges in my hand. I put them out on the coffee table in front of Tristan, running behind the TV to connect the console and plug in the power cord. Well, we have Purgatory's Scream here, and he glanced down at the other game. Mass Shooter Extra Fun Time. He laughed crazily at that. As Tristan said the name of each game, the memories of playing them as a young boy came back to me, creeping out of my subconscious like childhood monsters. He handed me Purgatory's Scream, watching the console with pronounced skepticism. Good choice. You're going to love this. I remember you have to fight your way through Purgatory until you find God, I said, not wanting to ruin too much of the game for him. I turned on the TV and went over to the virtual god, putting the game cartridge in the slot. I had to twist it from side to side to get it in, just like when I was a kid. It was all coming back to me. I threw Tristan one of the controllers before turning back to the console. The white noise and static hissed on the TV expectantly. I stepped forward, raising my hand and slamming it down on the top of the eye. It immediately started glowing with a pale, ghostly light. The console shrieked and came to life beneath my hand as if I had struck a cobra. The plastic suddenly felt warm and fleshy, writhing and twitching beneath my fingers. The eye rolled wildly in its socket, flicking randomly over the room before stopping and looking straight at me. The static continued to hiss on the TV. I heard Tristan give a hoarse scream behind me. I could only stare, open-mouthed. The lidless eye never blinked. It gleamed with a fanatical luster, a deep rot of insanity shining deep down in its dilated pupil. I heard a low mechanical voice crying out through the scream of the static. "You have chosen Purgatory's Scream," the voice said, exploding through the room in deafening blasts and rumbles. "Thank you for choosing the virtual god. Please be patient while we load your new reality." The white noise from the TV continued escalating into a shrieking cacophony, the static expanding out over everything. The dots covered the furniture, the walls and the ceiling in flickering patterns. I felt myself falling forward. I realized with horror that the tunnel had started sucking me in somehow. It curved around me like a spiraling, three-dimensional fractal of black and white dots. I tried to scream as I got pulled forward, but it strangled in my throat when I started flying into it at the speed of light. The tunnel morphed and warped around me like an acid hallucination, melting and dripping into spiraling black and white trails. A small exit at the end loomed far ahead, just a pinpoint of blackness. It came rushing up at me, widening into an abyss. I fell through it, landing hard on the ground. The air was knocked out of my lungs in a great whoosh, pain rocketing through my back. My head swam and I couldn't see anything. I blinked quickly, trying to focus. For a long moment, I had no idea where I was or what had happened. Then my memories started filtering slowly back in. "What?" I rasped, looking around. Where the fuck am I? I found myself laying in the middle of a dead valley. Enormous mountains covered in fine, white sands loomed overhead in every direction, their tops as sharp as scalpels. There wasn't a sign of life as far as I could see, not a single blade of grass or a tree or insect flying through the air. The sky overhead constantly seethed with black smoke, the clouds bubbling and rippling with lightning strikes that moved from cloud to cloud every few seconds. Everything had a flat, grey sheen to it, from the dim light shining through the clouds, except when the lightning illuminated the dead world in bright, strobing flashes. Tristan lay a few feet away, his eyes fluttering as he groaned, his fingers twitching and clenching. I crawled over to him, shaking him. He awoke suddenly, his dark eyes meeting mine. He sat up, his arms flailing wildly, almost striking me in the face. "Calm down!" I yelled, falling backwards onto a soft sand dune. "It's just me." He grabbed his head, shaking it slowly from side to side. "Did someone drug me or something?" Tristan whispered in a hoarse voice. "No, it was that goddamn thing in the box, the virtual god. As soon as I turned it on, it sucked us in somehow. This had never happened to me as a kid while playing the virtual god." He looked like he was about to say something in response when the ground started trembling beneath us. At first, it was subtle, like the aftershocks of an earthquake, but it quickly accelerated into a cacophony of grinding stones and crashing earth. Black fissures opened up in the ground beneath my feet. The white sands disappeared down into them as if falling into an eternal hourglass. Something in the ground roared, a primal wail that split and distorted like thunder, so loud I could feel my bones tremble with the force of it. It reminded me of a lion's roar, but it sounded electronically slowed and amplified in strange, dissonant risings and fallings. A titanic face the size of a car emerged from the abyss. Its skin looked like rough sandstone, a golden beige with fine cracks. Two enormous, lidless eyes sat on the top of its pointed head, but it had no nose, no mouth or ears. The eyes bulged from its stony body, bulging spheres as glossy as obsidian. The primal roaring that emanated from its monstrous body seemed to flow out of every part of its skin, rippling the air in powerful currents like flowing mirages. Razor-sharp, pyramidal shoulders emerged, followed by two grasping hands, each one large enough to crush me to death within its grip, spiraling up its chest. I saw hundreds of people crucified, their mouths opened in silent screams, their eyes wide and wild. Countless white shards of bone poked out through the beast's skin, as long and thin as swords, penetrating through the hands and feet of each victim and keeping them locked in their positions of torment. Black veins wrapped around their legs and arms, disappearing into quarter-sized holes eaten into their skin. Fluid constantly pumped through the dark tendrils into the writhing victims. The stone skin seemed to ripple as the creature breathed through its alien body. Its massive chest expanded and contracted as lungs like forge bellows worked furiously. More and more pieces of sandy earth fell into the seemingly infinite void beneath the beast's frantic climbing. But I knew that, at this rate, it would rip its way out of the ground within seconds. I turned to run, seeing Tristan already sprinting blindly ahead up the sandy slope of the mountain. My heart pounded furiously in my chest as waves of adrenaline shook my body. At that moment, I had no rational thoughts, just the screaming primal panic telling me to get far away from this creature from hell. I zigzagged from side to side, feeling its alien eyes boring holes into my back. A heartbeat later, its heavy stone hand came smashing down only inches to the left of my body, swiping wildly at the dead earth. I felt the air whoosh past my head as if a tractor-trailer had just driven past. Fingers as thick as cinder blocks closed around the dune, gripping blindly at the sand and lifting tons of it into the air in a terrifying show of blind strength. The beast gave another splitting banshee shriek, a wail of insane fury. I continued sprinting blindly up the slope, my brother slipping and sliding 10 feet ahead of me. Sometimes we scrabbled on all fours, always hearing the strange creature with its rippling skin and crucified bodies ripping apart the earth to drag itself closer to us. My instinct told me that if this hellish thing got a hold of us, it would force us against the outside of its body with all the other silently shrieking victims, impaling us on the sharp points of bone that stuck out from its chest like the spikes of an iron maiden. Ahead of us, I saw a break in the ascending slope, a patch of jagged blackness cutting across the soft, yellow sands. It was the height of a child, opening up like a ragged, toothless mouth before us. A small, pinched face peeked out of the darkness. A little boy, He was an emaciated wreck. His scarecrow-thin body was wrapped in fraying, hole-filled clothes. He wore an ancient shirt and pair of jeans that looked like they were literally falling off his starving frame. Countless burns and scars covered every inch of his exposed skin, as if he had been tortured and beaten his entire life. The boy quickly waved me and Tristan forward, backing into the cave as he did so. His lips moved frantically, but I couldn't hear anything over the roaring of the beast. I was afraid to look back. I could feel and hear the ground shattering apart directly behind me. Tristan scrambled into the cave ahead of me, diving in head first and dragging himself forward like a panicked animal. I was only feet away, running on all fours through the slippery white sands that collapsed beneath me with every step. I thought my heart would explode if I didn't stop soon. My entire body was covered in sweat, but cold waves of adrenaline kept pushing me forward. The little boy had crawled deeper into the cave, his small, dirt-streaked face barely visible now. Tristan had disappeared into the shadows behind him. I leapt for the opening as a massive hand smashed down on the top of the cavern's opening directly above my head. Sharp splinters of rock rained down on me as I rolled through. One heavy piece cracked into the back of my ribs, forcing the air out of my lungs with a loud gasp. I screamed as pain exploded through my chest. I kept crawling forward towards the face of the boy as more rocks fell with a sound like a rushing waterfall. I must have lost consciousness, because the next thing I remember, someone was dragging me over rough rock. Pain like fire shot through my chest every time I breathed. Smaller cuts and agonies covered the rest of my body. I swore, my head swimming with a horrible splitting migraine. Ahead of me, Tristan turned around to face me, shining his cell phone's flashlight back at my face. I felt warm trickles of blood running down my forehead and back. "Where are we?" I gasped, looking around at the claustrophobic granite tunnel that closed in around us like a coffin. Tristan had to crawl forwards bent over, his back hunched. The little boy standing in front of him had no issue. However, "These are the tunnels to the Badlands," the little boy said, his scarred face a stoic, unreadable mask. "All the caverns here seem to connect there. Some of the other kids say there are even tunnels that lead to heaven and hell, but I've never seen them myself. I'm very careful where I go. If I see fire at the bottom of a tunnel, I turn around." "Smart kid. I don't know how you've lived this long." "Kid." I turned to my brother. "Tristan, we're trapped in the game," I said, wincing as I touched my side. I had definitely cracked a couple ribs. "We've got to beat it and get the hell out before we die here. I have a feeling that if we die here, we die for real. These broken ribs definitely feel real enough." "I thought it was something insane like that," Tristan responded, shaking his head disbelievingly. "In reality, I figure I'm probably in a coma somewhere hallucinating this whole thing. But sure, I'll play along. How do we beat the game?" "From what I remember, we have to somehow make our way through purgatory and find God," I answered, knowing how insane it sounded. The little boy shook his head furiously. I crawled to my feet, having to bend down like Tristan in the confined tunnel. Together, we started slowly creeping forward, using Tristan's phone to light the way. I wondered how the boy had passed through these tunnels in the dark. "You don't want to go back out into purgatory," the boy answered. "If the creepers catch you, you will end up crucified on their bodies forever. They keep you alive with their black creepers that eat their way into your body and give you water and food. They want to make sure you stay alive for the torture." "The creepers?" I asked. "Is that what you call them?" The boy nodded, his face going pale. "They're horrible," he said. "They've taken most of my friends. Everyone I first knew when I got here is stuck on one of their bodies. They can hear through their skin. If you walk on the dunes, they will hear you and crawl out of the abyss to get you." "Kid, what's your name?" Tristan asked, taking a step closer to the boy. He put a calloused hand on the boy's shoulder. The boy instinctively flinched, drawing away. "Gage," he said, still keeping a safe distance between us and him. He seemed flitty and uncertain, probably a result of the nightmarish and horrifying things he had seen here in purgatory. Gage bright. Where do these tunnels lead? Then, away from the creepers? I asked. Gage frowned, looking even more nervous now. I told you, to the Badlands. They have food and drinks there sometimes. I found a whole vending machine a few days ago, full of beef jerky and candy and soda. But there's things there, too. They're not as bad as the creepers. I don't think anything is as bad as the creepers, except maybe hell. As we talked and moved forward, I realized there was a strange, fiery light flickering from below us. The tunnel had started to descend rapidly, the smooth granite feeling slippery and smooth beneath my sneakers. "Be quiet now," Gage whispered urgently, his pale blue eyes widening as he stared intently down at the strobing radiance filling the tunnel. We're at the border of realities, and sometimes things creep out from the void and slip through the cracks. At the bottom of the steep tunnel, the cave started to morph and change. The stone looked like it slowly melted into pale yellow wallpaper. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered constantly, turned up to a whining drone like a drill in my brain. There was a filthy grey carpet covering the floors, glimmering wetly. Drops of sickly brown liquid were spattered over the top of it. A smell like pneumonia blew up from the hall. At the border of the cavern and the hallway, there were deep, black cracks spider-webbing through where the melted wood and frozen drippings of hard granite met. As Gage led us past them, I peered into the darkness outside. It looked like I was staring into an abyss, an infinite void as cold and empty as outer space. I thought I caught a flash of something pale and worm-like at the far edge of my vision, but when I turned to look, it was just more empty space. I looked forward, seeing Gage rapidly waving me forward, his face a frozen, pale mask of terror. He shook his head silently from side to side, his icy eyes never dropping from mine. He stared intently at me, the intelligence and fear reflected in his expression making him look like a much older boy. Tristan was peering into the countless rooms that covered each side of the hallway. I quickly walked forward, making as little noise as I could. "Gage," I whispered when we had gotten far away from those cracks. "Do you know where God is?" Gage looked over at me nervously, shaking his head, pointing forward. I glanced around at the rooms surrounding us, seeing them filled with upside-down stop signs, blinking traffic lights and other random objects. Some of them were totally empty, just filled with the piss-colored wallpaper and wet carpets. The next one had a dead, mummified body hanging from the ceiling. Its skin was so desiccated and papery that I couldn't even tell if it had been a man or a woman. Gage seemed totally unaffected by this. Glancing over with disinterest, I noticed other doors lead into their own straight, seemingly never-ending halls that disappeared in a pinpoint far off in the distance. I wondered just how big this place really was. Suddenly, Gage stopped, motioning me and Tristan near to him. "You guys are really looking to talk to God?" Gage whispered. I noticed that the far end of the hallway slowly morphed back into dark granite tunnels, the wood and stone mixing in unnatural, chaotic drippings and patterns. I nodded excitedly, talking louder than I meant to. Gage instantly winced. "We need to see God as soon as possible," I said. "Preferably before we die," Tristan added cynically. "God is at the top of the border of purgatory and heaven," Gage whispered, giving me a dirty look. "Keep your voice down before something notices us." He pointed at the end of the hall. I saw that here. The stone caverns ascended instead of descending. If you follow the path back up, you'll come out at the top of purgatory near the god's silver spire, but the place is swarming with creepers. I never got to hear the last of his thought. I heard a cracking like bones behind us. I jumped, spinning around to see the hallway tearing itself apart down the middle. The wall split apart, splintering and falling into a seemingly eternal abyss that lay all around it. Something alien twisted and spun there, a horror from between worlds. It reminded me of a massive hellish worm, something that had evolved in some dark black hole world where sinister and powerful monsters skittered under the surface. Circular ridges like those of an earthworm covered the length of its body. Its skin was pale and wet-looking, the color of writhing maggots. It was nearly as wide as the hallway itself, its body as long as a tunnel. The worm gave a soft hissing sound. Two milky cataract eyes stared out from each side of its head, flat and lacking any pupils or iris that I could see. Its lips were tightly pressed together, looking like no more than a pale, white scar healed across its monstrous face. Hundreds of hollow, translucent fangs curved outwards over it, overlapping and dripping with frothy saliva. Each looked large enough to impale a full-grown man. "The worm! Go up!" Gage screamed. "Don't let it take you." My cracked ribs shrieked with fresh waves of pain as I stumbled down the hall, towards the intersection of the stone and wood, where the cavern started rising in a steep slope. The floor collapsed beneath our feet, the wooden splinters exploding and clattering down into a seemingly never-ending drop. Tristan was in the lead, frantically making his way towards safety. Gage was by my side. Sharp pieces of dark granite littered the end of the hallway's floor. More and more loose pieces of the cavern fell downwards as the hallway ripped itself apart in a rhythmic, smashing cacophony, shaking the entire structure with chaotic rumbles. I felt the ground dissolving beneath my feet. Gage's eyes widened in horror next to me as the wooden boards started disassembling beneath him like pieces of a puzzle falling apart. A small foot caught one of the stones, the boy falling forward as if in slow motion. I leapt towards the stone floor only 5 feet away with all my strength, feeling the wood give a sickening lurch beneath me before disappearing. Gage screamed, his eyes widening as he fell. I scrambled down over the edge of the stone, trying to reach a hand out and grab him. But, within the space of a heartbeat, he was gone, falling down into the darkness, his screams fading like the last echoes of a dying heartbeat. Tristan and I stopped a few dozen feet down the stone cavern. I bent over, catching my breath and clutching my damaged chest. I heard Tristan hyperventilating only a few feet away. "Is Gage?" he asked. I nodded grimly. "He fell," I answered sadly. The stone cavern continued to shake violently. I could hear the worm softly slithering around its edges, slamming its massive body into the walls. Tristan and I looked up at the top of the tunnel, seeing a hypnotizing, rainbow-colored effulgence spiraling down from the top. Somehow, seeing such beauty in this place of horrors gave me a sliver of renewed hope. Gage wrapped an arm around my shoulders, helping me up. I stumbled forward, every breath an agony. We came out the top of the stone tunnel, finding ourselves standing on top of a sandy mountain. We were much higher than all the surrounding ones. I could look out hundreds of miles in each direction across the dead mountains of Purgatory, seeing the white sands and pointed peaks disappearing off in the distance. On top of the mountain we found ourselves on, I beheld a beautiful spire, soaring thousands of feet into the air. The top of it disappeared into the roiling clouds overhead. The beauty of the tower was breathtaking, its architecture graceful and otherworldly. Strands of fresh, polished silver spiraled up around its outside like the steps of a lighthouse. The tower grew thinner as it ascended, until the very top looked like no more than an enormous silver railroad spike stabbing up into the black clouds. "We need to find the door," I whispered at Tristan as we crept closer to the silver spire. It was only a few hundred feet away. As we drew closer, the size of the tower truly hit home, its top disappearing miles above my head. We hadn't made it far when the first soft rumblings started underneath our feet. Tristan gave me a look of absolute horror as fissures opened up all around us. I knew it was a creeper. A single moment later, a monstrous stone face appeared. Enormous arms dragged the abomination up and out of the splitting dunes. Tristan and I ran blindly toward the silver spire, the burning pain in my ribs temporarily forgotten in the rush of adrenaline and primal terror. An enormous hand came down, smashing hard into the ground feet in front of me. The powerful stone fingers swiped at the dunes around Tristan. He gave a cry like a little boy as they closed around his chest, lifting him into the air. The primal roaring of the creeper continued growing, the insane anger and bloodlust filling every note with their dark presence. I saw two long, pointed castle doors at the other side of the silver spire. These looked like they had been fashioned from solid gold. On the front of each, There were engraved pictures of strange creatures with 4 faces, one facing in each direction. They each had the faces of a lion, an eagle, an ox and a man, their bodies cloaked in armor. "Help me! Andrew!" Tristan pleaded, his voice growing distant as the creeper dragged him away. I felt sick and weak imagining my brother being tortured and crucified for all eternity on that hellish beast's body. Turning, I started jumping up and down, screaming at the creeper, its head ratcheted towards me, its bulbous, black eyes shining with an inhuman luster. With its other hand, it struck out blindly at me, but its fingers smashed into the silver spire above my head. The tower rung with a sound like a struck gong, a vibrating cacophony that rose in waves up and down its length. The creeper continued moving Tristan closer to its chest. I saw a clear spot there reserved just for him. As I watched, sharp points of bone suddenly poked out through its skin, setting the spot for Tristan's unending nightmare. I heard a hissing from behind me, a sound that sent both waves of dread and a small, simmering hope racing through my chest. I turned, seeing the worm emerging from the sands laying in front of the exit of the cavern, its pale, maggot-like head twisting up. The creeper roared at it. Tristan held frozen in place in its hand still, his lips frantically moving but no sounds coming out. The creeper and the worm stared at each other across a no-man's land of whipping dunes and blowing sands, neither moving. They might have both been statues at that moment. Without warning, they ran at each other, Tristan now completely forgotten. The creeper took his fist with Tristan still inside and struck out at the worm. I saw Tristan's body go flying in the chaos of the battle, soaring through the air in a graceful arc. Spatters of bright blood followed him through the air. A moment later, Tristan landed in front of me, gasping and bleeding. I ran over to him, my breath catching in my throat. His entire left arm was gone, ripped off. Bright red arterial blood spurted from the ragged stump, staining the beige sands a deep scarlet. His eyes met mine, fluttering and roaming the black, hellish skies overhead with ineffable pain and fear. I tried dragging him towards the door to the silver spire, but the tail of the worm had begun whipping wildly, missing us by inches. I was forced to drop him and sprint blindly for cover. Heading in the direction of the golden door, I heard a primal screaming. Seeing the creeper had grabbed the worm in its hands, twisting its body in its powerful hands. It threw the worm against the sands, the crashing sound booming across the world. As the worm lay limply twitching, the creeper slunk forward, ready to finish off its opponent. But the worm came to life, lunging towards the creeper. It pushed itself off the ground with its tail, uncoiling and flying across the air. Its gnashing teeth aimed for the creeper's stone head and bulging black eyes. It bit hard into the right side of the creeper's face, sending thick, oily blood exploding from the wound. The creeper's right eye exploded like a water balloon filled with sludge. The creeper screamed, grabbing the worm by its tail and pulling. It yanked the worm off along with a large chunk of its own face, whipping it against the ground again. The worm lay stunned for a second, which was all the creeper needed. The creeper put his 2 massive stone fists together, bringing them down on the back of the worm's pale head. There was an explosion like a plane crash as they connected, the worm's black brains exploding through the top of its body in a thick jet of gore. I ran through the silver door into the tower. Stairs made of fine threads of silver and gold spun around upwards, seemingly forever. I crept up the steps slowly, my breath coming in painful hitches after hours of this. I found myself at the top of the tower. It had continuously narrowed as I ascended, until it was no larger than a tomb. A silver door stood before me with a single eye engraved on it. Bracing myself for what lay behind, I flung it open. God stood before me, his skin as white and smooth as marble and eyes as black as smoke. He towered over me, his body softly radiating a rainbow of light that shimmered and rippled around him like a mystical aura. And yet, that face seemed oddly familiar. I stared through the layers of unfolding energy at God, realizing I saw my own face reflected there. "Why do you look like me?" I asked, confused and scared. God's eyes never blinked. They bored through me like lasers. It felt as if they were staring into my soul, as if everything was ripped open, laid out and revealed here in this tower of silver and gold. I am you, he spoke in a voice like thunder. After death, your consciousness continues evolving until it becomes me. All beings have their own god, their own future self that sits at the top of the silver spire. In many trillions of years, you will become a god in your own right. I had no idea what to say to that. If you're so powerful, can you bring Tristan and Gage back? They didn't deserve to die. After all, I said, God's white. Marble lips seemed to split into a faint smile at that. It is dangerous to say what anyone deserves. Does the sheep deserve slaughter? Do the birds caught in hurricanes deserve to have their bodies whipped against concrete until they're just blood and feathers? In the chaos of the universe, there is no mercy. And yet, actions have consequences. Gage and Tristan have already been judged and sent forward to continue their own path, their own evolution to the divine, and you must continue yours. The last words faded out into white noise and static. Black and white dots started crawling their way down God's marble white skin, over his smooth, flawless flesh. They continued expanding out into a tunnel, and yet again, I felt myself drawn forward. I found myself standing in front of the TV in my living room, the virtual god still plugged in. The eye glowed with a soft white radiance as I looked around. On the sofa behind me lay Tristan's body, crushed and broken, missing an arm. His sightless eyes stared blankly up, his face eternally frozen in a death mask of mortal terror. And in his remaining broken, bloody hand, I saw he was still tightly gripping the controller for the virtual god. Story 2. They found me lying in the middle of the snow. They're still searching for my friend. I'm so glad to finally be out of the cold. I can see the snow falling from the bedside window, and it would almost be comforting if it weren't for the constant whirring and beeping of all the medical equipment driving me insane. The doctors certainly think I am, or at least that's their explanation for what happened. They're saying that the stress and hypothermia caused some sort of hallucination or psychotic break. Screw them. They didn't see with their own 2 eyes what I did. I'm not insane. It's not even the worst part. Right now it's best to focus on your recovery. I'm sure they'll have your friend home by Christmas. Oh, you poor thing. I can't imagine how you must feel, but you know the whole town is looking for your friend. She wouldn't want you to worry. Don't worry, miss. It won't take long for us to find your friend. Just sit tight. I wish they'd all just shut up. They don't fucking understand. I saw her get snatched with my own 2 eyes, but I guess that doesn't matter to them. They're all out there looking for her, but they don't know the first thing about her. I'm the only one who knows. I'm the only one who really cares. Her name was Mallory, and she was more than just my friend. I was sitting in the front row in class the day she strolled in. On what should have been an unassuming Monday, I found myself annoyed. Annoyed at the little girl blocking the doorway because she was too afraid to let go of her grandma's hand. Annoyed at the amount of time the teacher took up trying to introduce her to the class before recess. Annoyed at how pathetic her sobbing was after my friend Vicky took her pretty red amulet. At first I found it a little funny, but after the millionth time it too just became annoying so much, so I couldn't ignore it anymore. Stop crying already. All she did was look up at me and continued to wail harder. In hindsight, that wasn't the best move. Awkwardly, I tried to make up for my sudden appearance by lending out my hand to hers. Sigh. Hurry up and stop crying or else I'll, just stop crying, okay? Sniffle. Okay. Now come on, go get your necklace back. It's an amulet. I don't care. Just go get it back. I practically had to drag her to where Vicky was on the swings. The whole way she cowered behind me, clenching my hand so hard I thought she was going to break it. Kate, why'd you bring this loser over here? She has something to say to you. I nudged Mallory forward, and at first I thought she was about to cry again, but then she spoke. That amulet doesn't belong to you. It's my grandmother's, so give it back. Please. For however cute she was, Vicky paid no mind as she flashed her amulet in her face. You want it back? Go on and take it from me then, weirdo. As she stood there trembling, Vicky wasted no time in laughing and pushing her to the ground. It was pathetic. Ugh, really. In quick motion, I pushed Vicky back, and as she fell, I grabbed her amulet. Kate, what the heck? I'm telling the teacher. Mrs. Springfield. The thank you. Don't thank me. You should have done it yourself. Seeing the tears start to form again, I didn't really know what else to say. Why, don't cry. We're in the 5th grade. Crying's for babies. Look, my name's Caitlin. What's yours? Mallory. Suddenly she wrapped her arms around me tight. What are you doing? We stood there for a moment. Not wanting to hear her cry again, I ended up awkwardly hugging her back. Gosh, if you're going to be so weak, everyone's going to pick on you. I can only help you so much. Sorry. She clung to me like the plague and ended up following me around a lot. It didn't help that we lived so close to each other. At first it was annoying, but eventually I actually started to enjoy her company. For a while actually, we hung out a lot, so after a shitty day, she was my go-to. This shit is so fucking stupid. How do people not understand the only reason he's saying all this shit is because I stood his bitch ass up? Look, just take a deep breath. It's already winter break, so everyone's going to forget. Besides, who cares what they actually think? It's not just that I thought we were cool, but he just had to go and ruin it. I never even wanted to agree on a date in the first place, but he brought all his stupid-ass friends, and it was so embarrassing I just said yes without thinking. This is why I hate men! I was fully prepared to continue ranting and raving for another couple of hours before Mallory put her hand on mine. I almost pulled away, but her hands were so soft, and it reminded me of why I was really there. Shit. My bad, Mallory. I'm okay now, I think. It's all right. We won't have to see any of them for a while anyways. Besides, we'll be too busy on our own. What does that mean? Last summer, you said you'd let me plan out our next little adventure after you dragged me around all summer. Remember? Ah, shit, I guess I did. Well, what did you think up for us to do anyways? We're going camping. As she kept up, she excitedly pointed at the endless forested mountain range off in the distance. A pure white landscape only interrupted by the thick greenery of the pine trees. For as beautiful as it looked from afar, nature's a mean bitch, and I really didn't want to be in her way. But it's going to be hella cold. No way I'm going up there. Huh? But you promised. Well, I guess I'm a liar then. Sorry. Fine, but I'm going up there with or without you. Oh, seriously? Can't we just have like a super long sleepover? It's been ages since we've had one. She looked away, most definitely pouting. I tried my best not to play her game because I always lose when we do, but she's just too good. Well, I'm going regardless. Sigh. I liked you better when you would just listen to me. So is that a yes? Finny. Yay! Okay, we're going to need to prep well, so make sure that you bring... Mallory took no time in celebration. With a quick hug and skip away, she knew she'd won again. It was nice though. Regrettably, I haven't been able to hang out with Mallory for a while, and I could tell by how she kept rambling about things we'd need to pack that she missed having me around too. I'll be up to get you early in the morning, so you better wake up for me. Hey, you're the one who's been sleeping through all my phone calls, dummy. She stopped in her tracks, looking down before she spoke again. I know, sorry. Hey, it's okay. I know you've been sick a lot, and I promise I don't want to pry, but your eyes... You haven't been sleeping well, have you? I'll be just fine. I knew her too well. As I hugged her, she practically crushed me, hugging back, and as I brushed my fingers through her wavy brown hair, she looked up at me. I promise I'll be there this time, no matter what. Kay. With that, she practically skipped all the way home with that stupid smile on her face. The sun wasn't even fully up yet when Mallory came calling. I really wish she had text, but regardless, I got changed for my vacation up the mountains. The drive was a long one, not that I was complaining. With the heater chasing away the cold and wrapped under a nice blanket, I easily fell asleep as Mallory's brisk pace made drives with her pretty enjoyable. Screech. I hit the back of my head on the headrest pretty hard, so when I first saw it, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Looking out into the vast sea of snow, I noticed something out of place. It filled my stomach with dread, and my head seemed to fill with static. I only saw it for a moment before Mallory grabbed me by the shoulders and stared deep into my eyes. It was only later that I'd find out what exactly that thing was. Ugh, what happened? I'm sorry. There was a bunny rabbit passing by and I didn't want to hit it. Haha. Seriously, I'm surprised you could even see it. Don't they turn white in the winter or something? Oh yeah, sorry. You can go back to bed if you want. I'll be more careful this time. Nah, we're almost there anyways, just don't kill us. I hit my head so hard I was seeing spots in my vision. Kate? Yeah? Do you believe in ghosts? It was an innocent enough question, but Mallory asked with so much sincerity, it made me giggle. No way. Did you watch a scary movie without me or something? No. Okay, maybe one, but that's not why. It's just how you would react if you were to see one. I don't know. Probably run away or something, but I wouldn't hide behind my best friend's back, that's for sure. Hey, you're just comfortable is all. Mallory seemed to ease her grip on the steering wheel, and as we peacefully strolled alone, we eventually pulled up to Mallory's spot. As Mallory stepped out of the car, I coveted the last few seconds of warmth from the heater before reluctantly stepping out. Wow, this place is empty. Not a single animal in sight. Yup, just the two of us. So, what do we do now? I want to build a snow fort. It'll be a bit of work, but it'll be super fun, and we'll be out of the cold too. Here, follow my lead. Forced manual labor wasn't exactly what I had planned to do that day, but with Mallory's grin ear to ear, I didn't really have a choice. Despite feeling like I was about to become a human popsicle, the warmth in my chest I felt by just being able to talk about all the stupid things in life with her really helped pass the time. Thankfully, before the sun stopped shining, we finished, and as we stepped into the hole Mallory called our room, we could finally rest. It really is so much warmer in here. How does that even work? Isn't it all snow? It's because the snow is really compact, and truthfully, I didn't care. If it was warm, that's all I needed to know, but Mallory only really talks to me, so I just let her go on like she does. When she first started camping with her dad, she wouldn't shut up about it. Sometimes it was annoying, but that day, it was more adorable than anything. And so that's how we can stay warm in here. Nerd. What? Hey, what was that for? What, it's not a bad thing. If you're a nerd, you're a nerd. Well, I've got the better athletics grade. Bringing up grades doesn't help your case. Meanie. Oh, come on, don't pout like that. You're too cute sometimes, you know that. Huh? What do you mean, cute? But you were just... Ah! You're horrible. I love to tease Mallory, and usually I knew when to quit, but I guess that day I just let it slip. She could barely stand to look at me as she dug her head in her hands. I'm cold. How you're the one who were like a million layers. I just am. She wormed her way so close I could feel her heartbeat race. Her face was awfully red, but even so her hands couldn't cover her wide smile as she nuzzled into my chest. If I promise to always be there for you, will you do the same? Yeah, of course. I've got you always. You know that. She finally looked at me with those sweet eyes. With her hands out of the way, I saw her face. She was always cute, but never had she seemed so pretty before. She closed her eyes, and before I knew it, she fell asleep. It's funny, really. Mallory's go-to excuse for her always looking so tired was that she could never sleep well. But whenever we were together, she always fell asleep first. I think I knew it then, even if only subconsciously. As I hugged her tight, she slept peacefully with not a care in the world. Truthfully, my face was even redder than hers. The universe is a cruel bitch. In an instant, your life could be shattered, and it wouldn't even matter to the greater world. Strangely, I woke up with the same dread in my stomach from before. It was confusing for sure, but it wasn't what immediately set me off. Mallory was missing. When I processed it, I jumped up and immediately called out her name. I was hoping to hear her mundane reply, but instead what called back was utterly inhuman. No animal or machine could have made that vile tune. I was stunned, but I had to find Mallory. As I left the hole, I went into the small corridor-like trench that led up towards the surface and saw her there. Mallory. Before I got another word out, she rushed at me. With her free hand, she covered my mouth and practically pushed me onto the ground. Mallory, what the hell? She looked at me with terror in her eyes as her other hand clung tightly to her now glowing amulet. It was then when I saw it. The human mind naturally tries to interrupt shapes into familiar objects, but there is nothing to relate that thing to. A shadow would give it that human quality it doesn't deserve to hold on to, but it's the closest thing I could think of. Staring at it broke what I thought I knew about this world. And despite not being able to process its full being, I just knew it was looking back at me. It just faced us for what felt like an eternity. Every second, my mind falling deeper into the abyss, but Mallory seemed to fare even worse. Her once warm face was drained and pale. She looked like she was about to fold. And her breathing, oh God, it sounded like the final gasps of a dying man. When it moved, I couldn't hold back anymore. Screaming, I saw its manifested arm reach towards her amulet, and as it encroached, it was stripping away at the space around. It was literally tearing the very reality around her amulet. Please, let go! I guess it was just a cruel twist of fate that the amulet decided then to react, and as it glowed fiercely, the thing started to dissipate, and with some otherworldly screech, it had completely vanished. Thud. Mallory collapsed hard. She was out, and all that was left was my body in the relentless cold. I wish I could say that I was able to get up and help Mallory to her truck. I wish I could say that I drove us out of there, but I didn't do anything. Instead, I laid there, knees anchored in the snow. As my mind went blank, I collapsed exhausted right next to her. Kate, come on. We have to get out of here. I woke up to Mallory shaking me awake. The pure bliss that falling asleep had afforded me was gone, and I didn't have the balls to keep going. Staring at her, I let it all out. My eyes became waterfalls, and as I threatened to break, Mallory was quick to embrace me. For a minute, she held me in her arms, my face in her chest as she tightly squeezed. I was able to regain my breath. Hey, remember when we went bungee jumping that one time, and you practically made me deaf when the instructor pushed you? Yeah. I think you finally beat that scream today. Reminiscing at our past experiences helped me to focus on something other. Then and before I knew it, we were in her truck ready to get out of this nightmare. Rumble, click, click. The truck wouldn't start. Slam. Damn. Stay here. Let me check the engine. I stayed wrapped up in my blanket as I watched her hop out and lift the hood of the car. I saw the moment when her armor chipped. Her eyes widened and her complexion drained. I couldn't see much from my end, but the edges of the hood looked scrambled. It was as if someone had literally rearranged the very atoms that made up that part of the world. She slowly walked to my side of the door and laid her head on my chest. Are we going to die here? It was all I could think to say. No. You'll be okay, I promise. Her voice shook and her breathing was shaky too. She took a small moment to catch her breath and she spoke again. There's a more public camping site in the area. If we start walking, we might make it before nightfall. Oh. She took my hand in hers and helped me out of the truck. Reality was starting to sink in again, and the cold biting at my already deteriorating mind didn't help either. I moved my feet, but I didn't walk. My body repeating the same motion as Mallory dragged me along. You know, we should really check out that new restaurant they opened in town. I don't really like sushi, but I know you do. Yeah. We should go when we get back. Sure. The only reason I could even trudge forward was because of the warmth of Mallory's hand. She did her best to drive away the fear, but as the snow wore us down and the sun retracted its blessings, she apologized. Sorry, Kate. We both knew that once the light was gone, it was going to come back. All we could do now was hope that we reached the camping site before it got to us. I had never felt so empty before. It wasn't fear anymore. I don't know how long we kept walking, but I remember instantly knowing the moment it started to follow us again. I didn't even bother to look back. I just simply let Mallory drag my comatose body through the snow. A minute passed, then another, and I could feel its otherworldly presence slowly enveloping my body. The only other noise we could hear now was that of Mallory's heavy panting as she stubbornly trekked through the snow. I couldn't even dignify us with a quick death. Instead, I felt a sense that I was being completely surrounded by its presence. The reality around was slowly being stripped away, and as we crested the mass meekly, imitating our world, we saw in the distance a brightly lit cabin taunting us in the dark. "Kate, I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have done more to protect you, but I'll make things right." As she let go of my hand, she looked me in my eyes and found my fragile soul. "I love you, Caitlin. Please don't ever forget that." I think a part of me had known for a while, but I never really wanted to think about it. She walked straight past me, and as the creature manifested its arm, it quickly stripped away at the space around her. The amulet, red and glowing, could simply not stop it this time, and as I watched her slowly lose her shape, I made a choice. Lunging forward, I grabbed the amulet. I drove it into where I thought that thing was, but it rejected it and slammed me back into the snow. I felt it stare down my soul then. "Wait, please, why does it matter? Why does it have to be her? You can't even tell us apart." I saw her drop to her knees and grovel on the ground like she was some elementary kid again. "Please, please, I'll allow you to have my body, just please leave her alone." I don't know why that thing decided to listen to her prayers, but I saw it take her away. It was something out of a nightmare. Its manifested hand slowly stripped away at her body until the space she occupied was no more. I didn't have the energy to scream. I didn't have the energy to move. I couldn't even face her as she smiled. I just passed out in the snow again, unable to do a thing. Laying here in this hospital room typing this out, it hurts a lot. Mallory had found the time to pick up the pieces of my soul and slowly piece them together. Her words saved me, and I was far too weak to do the same. Hell! I was too weak to even make her sacrifice matter. It was luck that really saved me as my frigid body lay there in the snow. It was a stranger who spotted me. Even now, I can't do a damn thing but watch from the window as rescue team after rescue team attempts the impossible. She's gone now, but I promise I'm going to find her. This time I'm going to save Mallory. I don't care if it'll take me the rest of my days, but I need to get her back. She poured her heart out, and I was unable to respond, but I will never forget. Mallory, I love you. Story 3. Something is knocking on the wall of my dorm room. Scrubbing blood from any surface is harder than you expect. It gets under your nails before you realize it, and the smell hangs in the air, poisoning the room. I remember going through the motions in shock the morning after all of this happened, methodically scraping away at the floor and walls until everything was clean. At the same time, it's also easy, in an unsettling way. Generic bleach cleaner and dish soap works perfectly fine. I had to put the sheets into the garbage, though there was no salvaging those. I ended up sitting alone in my spotless bedroom, surrounded by a heap of bloody rags, while trying to make sense of what I had seen the night before. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I met my freshman year roommate for the first time the weekend before classes started. We'd found each other on Instagram. I'm Emma and you're Gemma. Isn't that cool? We were both math majors and read the same books, so I figured I might as well take my chances compared to a random assignment. It made sense that choosing someone with common interests was statistically less likely to end in disaster. Gemma was half a head taller than me, with elegant features and perfect blonde hair that fell down her back in waves. She had a cold sense to her, with a resting face sullen enough that it looked like a permanent glare at first glance. But when she smiled, it softened her angles into something more approachable. Everything about her made me a little envious and a bit self-conscious, and I wished I could carry the same gravity with me when I walked into a room. The first week of classes passed without incident, and I tried to force myself out of my shell, talking to as many people as possible and trying fruitlessly to remember all their names. Gemma and I didn't spend as much time together as we had over the first weekend, but we still hung out and watched TV together at night. It was strange being away from home, but I fell into the routine, taking comfort in wrapping myself in blankets and drifting to sleep at the end of each day. Chatter from the hallway leaked through the thin walls late into the night, but I was tired enough that it didn't matter. My bed was in the corner of the room, and the presence of a wall right next to me gave me an odd sense of security. At least, until Saturday. I thought I was getting into the swing of things. Gemma had been staying out later than I had the few nights before, and I trusted her to be quiet when she came into the room. I went ahead and crawled into bed, hearing her enter minutes later. I tossed and turned as she went to sleep, her breathing evening out and falling into a steady rhythm. It was then that I heard it, a knock, coming from the other side of my wall, a few feet above my head. I jerked up, turning to see if Gemma had heard it. She was still fast asleep. The noise too soft to hear across the room. The sound came again, 2 clear taps. Knock, knock. It sent chills down my spine, and I curled into my pillow, wondering if I should check the peephole. Maybe it was someone I knew. But the knock was on the wall, not the door. I was sure of it, and there was no more chatter in the hallway. Eventually, the exhaustion of the day caught up to me. I woke up with my blankets twisted around me, my shirt sticking to my skin with sweat. A sense of unease remained in my mind, and I couldn't pinpoint what caused it. At that point, the knocking seemed like a faint dream, and I didn't believe it was real until I heard it again the next night. Knock, knock. I lay perfectly still, Gemma's inhale-exhale on loop anchoring me to reality. The night before, I had brushed it off as my brain imagining things, but the tapping continued, repeating over and over. Knock, 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 knock. I was fed up. I threw the covers off me and peered through the peephole, not seeing anyone outside. The knocking was fainter when it wasn't next to the wall, but I could still hear it. Maybe whoever it was just out of my field of vision. As soon as the door creaked open, the sound stopped. I craned my head past the doorway, taking in the expanse of the hall. It was completely empty. I gave up and went back to bed. The sound started up again immediately, moving down the wall until it was right next to my head. I shoved all my pillows between me and the wall and clapped my hands over my ears, curling into a ball and staying there until sleep overtook me. When it kept happening, I tried talking to Gemma about it. I keep hearing a knocking on the wall at night, I brought up hesitantly one afternoon. She looked at me strangely. "That's weird," she said. I didn't notice anything like that. I didn't know what else to do, so I just nodded awkwardly and walked away. We got along fine, but we weren't close enough that I could ask to swap beds for a night or something similar. I tried waking her up one night when it became too loud for me to sleep. When I walked over to her side of the room, tiptoeing to avoid tripping over my feet in the dark, I could still hear the sound, although fainter. "Hey," I whispered. "Wake up for a second. Can you hear that?" She opened an eye blearily and glared at me, trying to concentrate. After a moment, she shook her head. "I can't hear anything. Stop bothering me." She pulled the covers over her head and turned away. I cursed under my breath, convinced that the knocking had stopped on purpose as soon as I brought it up with her. I felt guilty about it the next morning, so I tried to make sure she wasn't upset about it. "Sorry about last night," I said sheepishly. "I hope I didn't mess up your sleep." "It's fine," she shrugged. I didn't hear anything, though. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, half the semester was over. The knocking continued nightly, although at this point it had become routine to me. I tried to assuage my spiraling thoughts that something would jump out and attack me, even if there is a monster on the other side. Gemma's intimidating enough that it'll probably be scared off by her before it can attack us. I laughed about it to myself. Back then, I wish it would have stayed a joke. I felt a sense of unease around me as the weather started getting colder. Gemma talked to me less and less, and stopped smiling completely. I didn't know what I could have done wrong. Once, I asked her how her day was, and she ignored me, walking out of the room minutes later while muttering under her breath. We started avoiding each other, and I tensed up every time she entered the room, brusque and angry with her lips always pulled into a frown, hostility permeating the air even though she hadn't done anything to make me afraid. It was just really, really awkward. She seemed to pretend I didn't exist, turning on the TV before I was awake and almost making me fall out of the bed with how loud it was. She'd blast music too, enough that it could be heard through the door and halfway down the hallway. Her frosty demeanor almost made me scared to be in the room. But there weren't any friends I was close enough to that I could camp out with them every evening. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. She was just a person, and all that her chilly attitude was doing was making my college experience a little uncomfortable. Through all of this, the knocking kept appearing without fail every night. Eventually, I was fed up enough to try investigating. Someone is knocking on the wall, and then disappearing. Whenever I check the peephole, it's empty, and there aren't any footsteps either. I had the horrible thought that something could be in the wall, but chased it out of my head. The frame was only a few inches across. There was no way anything living could fit inside of it. The same day, as I was getting ready for bed, Gemma opened the closet door right into my face. It hit me square in the nose and I cried out, stinging pain prickling around my eyes and forehead. She continued as if nothing had happened, and I was so frustrated I could have screamed. Gemma didn't come back to the room that night, and I felt lonelier than ever, sad and angry enough to act foolishly. I knocked back. When the tapping started, I reached up to the wall and rapped it gently, echoing the sound. The knocking stopped abruptly, and I was left in complete silence for a second before it accelerated. So fast it seemed like something was excited. Knock, 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 knock. I woke up in the morning blinking hazy images from my memories, dreams of being pulled into a dark void, an endless array of limbs wrapping around me and dragging me further into the black. I was terrified that somehow I had opened a door, and whatever was inside my walls knew that I was on the other side, soft and vulnerable. I didn't see Gemma around much anymore. Usually, we would run into each other a couple times in the afternoons and evenings, but at this point it was a surprise to me if I saw her before I went to sleep. Whenever she came inside, she was brusque and perpetually furious, and her demeanor set my heart on edge. Finals were approaching quickly, and I tried to reach out to every acquaintance I had made over the course of a few weeks, hoping I could pull myself out of my funk and finish the semester strong. I had to remind myself every night that there was no reason to be afraid, and my thoughts cycled between various lines of reasoning. Often, I would respond to whatever was on the other side of my wall like it was a friend, only to receive indecipherable knocks in return. Other times, if something's living in there, I hope it goes for Gemma first. I still feel guilty about that one. Fast forward to last week, when it all came to a head. I woke up in the middle of the night covered in sweat, my hair sticking to the back of my shirt uncomfortably. Next to me, the knocking was louder than it had ever been before, which was strange, because it tended to be quiet if I ever woke up in the middle of the night. I looked over to my bedside table, fumbling for my glasses for a second before giving up and squinting at the clock. 3:03 a.m. I glanced up. Gemma was standing over me, a knife poised over my chest. Her lips were pulled into either a smile or a grimace, but it was too blurry to tell. I screamed and rolled off the bed, and the blade caught the edge of my shirt, slicing into my shoulder. I couldn't see the wound very clearly, but warmth trickled down my skin, adrenaline distracting me from the pain. She lunged at me again, and I dodged, colliding with the side of the bed and stumbling. I ran for the door fruitlessly, hoping to swipe at the light switch, but she grabbed me by the back of my shirt, throwing me against the wall. I gasped out something along the lines of, "Why are you doing this? What's gotten into you?" She didn't bother with a response, moving once again to drive the knife into my heart. I flailed and twisted a doorknob open, diving into my closet and holding the door closed with every ounce of strength I had. The door frame rattled as she attempted to wrench it open, and I could only watch in fear as the hopeless tug-of-war slid in her favor. I let go, aiming for the door to fly open and knock her back, but she must have been anticipating it, digging the blade into my side as I ran into the room and dragging it backwards. I clutched my hand to my waist, trying to staunch the bleeding as my side erupted in fire, the pain finally overpowering the endorphins. Gemma's movements were erratic, and she swung the knife in wild arcs through the air. I saw an opportunity and drove my fist into her stomach. There was a clatter as the knife dropped to the floor, and I kicked it away, planning to make a beeline for the door and call for help while she was distracted. It was no use. Gemma was taller and stronger than me, and I regretted staying curled up on my bed the entire semester instead of working out as her hands wrapped around my throat and started to squeeze. I slapped my hands uselessly against her chest and face, but it didn't faze her, and spots appeared in my field of vision. The rest is a twisted blur to me. Somehow, I could hear the knocking again. That's not right. I thought as my life was slowly ripped from my lungs. That's too loud. Shouldn't be possible. An explosion of noise. A massive, overwhelming tearing. A whirlwind of limbs and eyes and teeth burst out of the wall, pulling Gemma off of me as if she were a piece of paper. I couldn't quite comprehend what I was seeing. It was tall, taller than the room, bending in odd angles and wrapping too many arms around her thrashing form. Dots of light that could have been eyes and jagged seams with teeth poking out lined it from head to toe. It tore into her, a blur of gory red. Gemma fell limp. The creature retreated back into the wall and pulled her in with it, leaving me frozen to the floor in shock. I sat there for hours, unmoving, until exhaustion took over and I collapsed to the ground. I woke up a few hours later to see the wall intact, with no indication that some inexplicable being had made its home inside. Thankfully, I hadn't bled out, and the jagged wounds on my waist and shoulders were mostly clotted shut. I cleaned up all of the blood and showered, going about my day on autopilot. The knocking was still there. The next couple nights, though it was softer, "Are you still there?" it seemed to be asking. I was too scared to respond at first, but I gave in on the last time I slept in that room, tapping twice. "Thank you." I hope it understood me. My room change form went through for the following semester, much to my relief. The police did come by after finals, with Gemma's absence from every exam being suspicious enough to declare her missing. I denied seeing her, and they didn't inquire any further. I still don't know what the creature was, or where it came from. It might still be there. Maybe there are more, an array of inhuman beings taking up in-between spaces, listening for a friendly voice. Or maybe it was entirely random, and I had just as much of a chance of being taken as she did. Either way, I'm praying that my mind is playing tricks on me. It's been 2 weeks since this semester started, and I swear I heard knocking again the other night. The thing is, my new room is a single. Wish me luck. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.